was a 19-year-old undergraduate at university and working for the summer in a laboratory of a famous scientist. And the guy was a role model of sorts, really a great guy. And one day I remember watching him walk down the hall, and he loved running a lab, he loved being a scientist. Had a good family too. He wasn't a narrow-minded guy. But I remember the afternoon when he left the lab, as he was walking down the hall away from me, and I said, "Boy, what a great guy. He loves his work. I wonder, that must be a good profession. If it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. I think I'll try it." So it was really mimicry. And then it all worked out. I liked it. Very hard to say. I'm, you never know, right? This is always speculation. But I suspect not too much. I guess I could make I could speculate that it had an indirect effect, very indirect, only in the sense that this incident I just told you about, this professor that I emulated, that was at Caltech, and I was raised in Boston, and I went far away to university from one side of the country to the other, in part to get away from a not very pleasant home life. And so one could argue that my upbringing had an indirect effect, causing me to go far away. And then that led me into a school where science was really preeminent. And so that gave me the opportunity to meet people who were scientists and do things like that. So that, not in the sense of having a scientist father who, so it's a very indirect effect. Well, I was more of a night owl when I was younger, and I'm a little more of an early bird now, and that's a change, which is very common. Young people tend to be more night owl-ish, and as you age, people turn earlier. They wake up earlier and go to sleep earlier, and I'm a perfectly average representative of that transition. I actually don't remember the first time, because how interesting question. I don't think anybody's asked me that, so I haven't really thought about it. He was already at Branda. He arrived at Branda 6 months before I did. So it must have been, if not the first day, one of the very first days I was there. But I don't remember some charismatic moment or some epiphany or something like that. Just he was more or less part of the infrastructure. As soon as I arrived, we became friends. We were both singles, sports, music, being a little bit rebellious. We were both influenced by the 60s, anti-Vietnam War. So we had a lot of shared experiences, shared friends, even shared. He was a postdoc at Caltech, where I was an undergraduate. So we knew people in common, knew professors in common. So it was simple overlap of interest, quite adolescent, I would say, despite the fact we were in our 30s. Well, on the one hand, we had very different trainings. So we were trained in really very different disciplines. So I think it was very useful to come at the scientific problem from two different directions, think about it differently. We also have very different personalities. So I think that also was complementary. Jeff has a photographic memory and as a consequence, a very broad knowledge of everything related. And my memory's not nearly so good. I tend to be more focused. And so I think even from that point of view, he has a reservoir of information. And I tend to be more direct and focused. So I think that mix was also positive. As the 80s continued, the problem just got broader. So at the very beginning, I think we were competing in part, not because of any malevolence. But the problem was there were a very small number of things to do. And so in order to make progress, you had to clone this gene and you had to do this stuff, and we were both doing it because there was nothing else to do, really. And after that was done, then the problem got broader. And so then we started to do different things. And once we started to do different things, then we were no longer competing, and then the tension of competition disappeared, and then you could start to have more friendly conversations, and then collaborations ensued just as, hey, you're interested in this, we're doing this, why don't we get together and try to see if we can do this little project or something. So it was just a natural progression. Collaboration is always, I mean, Jeff and I were sort of special category because we were friends and we were at the same institution and we decided to join forces effectively permanently. With Mike, it was just once things settled down, then so we collaborated sporadically with Mike. It wasn't continuous or persistent. Just that when an idea came up, and we would do that, and so we were friendly colleagues and occasionally collaborators. I think it's possible that someone will, and so control. So there are two ways you can imagine doing this. One is to just effectively find natural lifestyle regimes which could strengthen the clock, some way of combating jet lag or reinforcing the clock by, God knows, taking nutritional supplements or using certain light regime at a certain time of day, something like that. And then you can imagine chemicals, meds, that would impact clock proteins that you could. So the latter really good ones haven't been derived. There are companies trying to do that. So is it possible that we could do that? Sure. I think it would be great if we had a pill for jet lag and could simply shift the clock at will by a certain amount so that when you fly to Stockholm from Boston, you immediately shift your clock. As for aging, which was the second half of your question, it's hard to know because I think the clock gets weaker and changes a bit. As I said, you go from being a late night person, a night owl to early bird with aging. Would it matter a whole lot if you had some meds to change that? Probably not too much. Is the decrement in circadian performance with age a big part of aging? I sort of doubt it. It may be a small part. So will it really combat aging in a major way? I sort of doubt it, but who knows, right? If we have the tools, we'll find out, right? Oh, I have terrible problems with jet lag. I have absolutely no solutions of any kind. I mean, I take heavy-duty benzodiazepine agonists, sleep meds to sleep, and the rest of me doesn't adjust very quickly. I'm slow to adjust. I'm worse with age, like everything, as I said, or almost everything. So I'm myself in search of a good solution. So not very successful, I'm afraid. So I think what makes that interesting analogy is that our perception of light, and when I say our perception, I mean the circadian perception of light, actually has a separate pathway into the brain. So I see you because of a path from the retina to the visual cortex. But there's a separate path from the back of the eye, from the retina, to the hypothalamus, which is the location of the master pacemaker in the brain. And one could consider those photoreceptor cells in the back of the eye, which are special and dedicated to circadian perception, and the pathway to the hypothalamus, almost like a sixth sense, as if you had special nerve endings to detect a special feature of the environment. And so in that sense, being able to reset with light, which we do every day, but very modestly, by about 12 to 15 minutes, is in fact a sixth sense, and it enhances our ability to live in this 24-hour rotating world. It's not that we couldn't live without it, but we live much better by being able to entrain and stay locked into the world. Is it important to have a mentor? So I'm fixating on the word important. I think it's advantageous. That's almost the same as important, right? I think role models are very useful for young people. And so, parents, good parents serve as role models and teachers. And so I think having people you admire and that teach you how to be an adult, how to be a successful adult, are good things. And like all biological phenomena, this is statistical. So I think there are some people who do great with no role models. And there are other people who do terribly in life, even exposed to great role models. But I think for the average person, or I should say the statistical average, I think it's very helpful. And we remember, what does it mean to do better anyway? I think we remember fondly our role models and those of us who had good ones, and whether we would have done just as well. There's no control experiments in life. Life is a one-shot deal, so you never know what was really responsible for something. You only speculate. But if you keep good memories, and those role models are part of good memories, then that's a good thing. And probably they make a positive contribution. And who are your mentors? The guy I mentioned at Caltech, who was my undergraduate advisor in whose lab I worked. I had very important experiences with my PhD advisor at MIT, with a postdoc advisor in Edinburgh, in Scotland. I would call them less role models, but important people. I was older by then, so people became less role models than you could pick and choose. As you get older, I think you pick and choose from people what you find admirable and what you think, oh, that's a good thing to do, or copy, and other things that you learn as they're almost negative features, but once you recognize them, you say, oh, that's something I'm going to avoid. I don't like that, and that's something I'm going to try to avoid. So I think as you get older, that becomes a little more mixed. But they all become, so it's all part of the rich pageant of life, right? Well, I think I've said this before in other venues. I think it's very important to find your passion in life. I think it's a great gift to love your job. There are a lot of people who find a great love in life, a partner. Children are easy to love, family. I think it's harder to find work that you love, and I think young people should be diligent in trying to find a passion, and then try to do it. Go for it. And even if it doesn't work, there are many passions in life where it's very hard to make a living. Science we're very fortunate because statistically speaking, it's easy to make a good living being a scientist. That not everyone is wildly successful, but the point is you can earn a good living, support your family, have a good life as a scientist. Not universally, not everyone, but a significant fraction of the population. If you're a dancer or a musician or a writer, and we all know people like this, the fraction of people in those professions who can make a good living is much, much smaller. Nonetheless, I think if that's your passion and you're 18 years old or 20 years old, you want to try. And doesn't work, you do something else 5, 10 years later. But you want to be able to look back and say, I gave it a try. And I guess the second piece of advice is to try really hard. Don't be afraid of failing. I think a lot of young people have a fear of failure, and that prevents them from putting 100% of their effort into something, trying really hard, because that way they always have the excuse that I didn't try hard. And so those are my two pieces of advice. The true answer is everywhere. So I'm quite obsessive about thinking about work, and so I'll be in any kind of circumstance. It's not like everything. This trait has advantages and disadvantages. The advantages is I'm quite focused, and I think about experiments or work at the lab all the time. That the bad part of it is that I can tend not to live in the moment, right? So it's good life advice to people to really live in the moment, whatever you're presented with, give it your full attention. And when your children or grandchildren are speaking to you, you should really focus on what they're, and if you're thinking about your experiments, it takes away from the occasion of the moment. So I'm thinking about that all the time. My family's great. They're very tolerant. My wife was a scientist. She's retired, but she understands this whole business and was quite obsessive herself when she was younger. And so, they appreciate the fact that I love what I do, and that it's even when it for them sometimes, as I mentioned, for example, not paying attention is a disadvantage for them. My girls were often at the table saying, "Dad, I'm speaking to you," because they could see that you were not really listening, even though you were staring at them. So they've been very forgiving. Oh yeah, no, I have free time, sure. I had less when I was when our children were young, because it turned out working hard and being obsessive about work plus having children those two are. There's not much free time left after that. But once the children grew up or were less of a daily preoccupation, what do I like to do? So I go to the gym. I like sports. I like watching sports. I like doing sports. I read books. Interested in politics. Read the newspaper. Go for walks. We go to the movies. We like to eat, cook. We're travelers. My wife comes from South America, from Chile, so we go there quite often. We both have friends all over the world. Science is a quite international profession, so I was grad student postdoc with people who are spread all over the world, and some of those close friends don't live in Boston, so we will travel to see them or travel with them on vacation to go places, see places. So we have a lot of hobbies that we engage in. So I think teamwork, right? So running a laboratory, working in a laboratory is a lot about team. You really work with other people. People think of scientists as the traditional cartoon view is a man in a white coat who's either looking down a microscope or doing math equations. It's a very solitary profession. But in fact, it's a very social profession. And many scientists are quite gregarious, I think, compared to math and literature, for example, where people who are writers are really, that is a solitary profession. Ours is really not. So I think teamwork and working with other people, figuring out how to deal with ego, individual accomplishment versus team accomplishment, all that stuff is good. So that's a sports lesson. I'm interested in sleep. Sleep is a unknown phenomenon, really quite a challenge for neuroscience. Why do we sleep? What's the function of sleep? I think there are some good possibilities, but there's no well agreed upon major singular function. Fruit flies which of course were my specialized organism for circadian work. Fruit flies sleep, and they sleep in a way that's quite similar to humans. And so the idea is that if we could discover the function of sleep in flies, we would probably find the ancient and conserved function that's shared with humans in the same way, by analogy to having found something important about circadian rhythms in flies that turns out to be general and applicable to humans as well. So what's the real function of sleep? That's one, and I'm interested also in some details about circadian rhythms. What is really responsible for the timing principles, the timing mechanism? Why 24 hours? Why not 20 or 28 or 30? In other words, what is actually doing the counting? You know, the prize is physiology or medicine. It's not medicine, and I think understanding or opening a frontier in terms of human understanding, the fact that this internal clock has been demystified, and what is the nature of the timing? What's the mechanism that's doing the timing? I think, as in many human endeavors, it enriches us to understand a basic principle of biology in the same way that understanding vision, of the retina, even before it could cure disease, was just part of expanding human understanding. So I think we will make some progress from ameliorating life, not just jet lag, but physiological coherence. There'll be ways to make internal physiological processes run better, to be more in tune with their inner clock. But I think that's mostly in the future. And for now, it's just demystified, something that was always there. What is this crazy clock? And now we know something about it.